So the fine folks over at Right Stuff Anime decided to work with my channel and send me 2 review copies, the first of which is Gundam Thunderbolt December Sky, as well as Gundam Thunderbolt Bandit Flower, both of which were upon my request. I had a pretty hefty list of anime to choose from, and I went with my gut, something I've been eager to watch for quite some time. And not only did they decide to send me these copies upon my request, they also decided to work with the channel to send one lucky winner a $50 Right Stuff gift card, which you can find out how you can enter to win at the end of the video. Gundam and myself don't have a long history. Up until this point, the only thing I've really watched to completion was Iron-Blooded Orphans, but Thunderbolt's been something that, ever since it was initially created as an ONA series to then it was compiled into what was called December Sky, which then Season 2 was compiled into a movie which was called Bandit Flower. I've heard nothing but good things about its visual production that rivaled many movies out there and is considered to be one of the best looking anime of all time, but also is considered to have a pretty solid war-style story. I've been really eager to see what the hype was all about, and honestly walking out of both of these movies, I can safely say the hype delivered, and it left me not only wanting to see a third season, which hopefully sometime in the near future we will, which then will be compiled once again into another movie series, it also has me eager to watch more Gundam. One thing I can say for anyone, if you're looking for just eye candy, this series is absolutely for you. But if you're looking for something a bit more meaty and personal, it also hits that sweet spot where it really does feel like a very personal story where it's not easy to say which side's in the right and which side's in the wrong. Rather, war is a pretty messy thing, all things considered, and everyone's perspectives can feel like the most important. The story focuses around 2 primary focal points. The first perspective is we have Daryl, the hotshot sniper of the Zeon Force, who is honestly an incredible sniper. If you look at Gundams and just big mecha battles, you don't really think of giant-ass sniper battles, but I have to say, this one really does show you why a good sniper will always go a long way in any war, as when you're floating around in giant debris and how are you going to make a shot, you want someone like Daryl on your side because more often than not he's never going to miss his target, even though he's lost plenty of limbs up until this point when the show kicks off. Then on the Federation side you have Fleming, who is a more traditional Gundam pilot who has a personality that generally is pretty fun to listen to, and more often than not you're not going to want to beat him over the head, and you're just really interested in both perspectives. Rather than doing what traditionally I think war-style stories do, where they put the focus on one side and you really grow accustomed to these characters, so when someone dies or you feel like you see the antagonists or the enemies, you know they're the bad guys, and that's kind of how you feel. Here, what Gundam Thunderbolt does is it puts you on both perspectives seemingly equally. In December Sky, you focus a bit more on Daryl's side, where on Bandit Flower's section, you focus a lot more on Fleming's side. But overall, you get a good idea of both sides and their personal stories, so every time they meet up on the battlefield, I never really had someone I wanted to root for, which is honestly one of the first times I've seen a show like this really take that perspective, and it's something I've heard Gundam does fairly well more often than not. What this story does is it throws you in the Thunderbolt sector, and Thunderbolt sector really does live up to its name. When you're fighting in this sector, a giant burst of lightning can come out at any time, which could be your saving grace, or it could cause you to miss a shot that was going to finally take out the person who's not only killed your comrades, but also has been your greatest adversary for this entire run. I really enjoyed this story for the sense that it's not necessarily about a grand picture, where Bandit Flower does go more into what technology does, what the innovation of different soldiers and Gundams will do, but when you're watching December Sky, rather than saying this is a life or death situation where we're really connected with the governments, the Zeon, the Federation, for me, what I got out of these movies watching was rather, instead of focusing super into the history and the culture of each side, obviously if you have your fair knowledge of Gundam's universe, you're going to get a lot more out of it in that sense. But what this did was Daryl and Fleming were both equally interesting protagonists. You kick off with a gorgeous fight that just sucks you in and makes you crave more. But what it does very quickly is it makes you care about Daryl. It makes you say, this is an interesting sniper, and you feel like he's the hero as you look at someone like Fleming, who seems a bit more like a maniac. He seems a bit more like he's enjoying this a little too much, where you have someone like Daryl who's just being a more cool, calm, collected sniper, who doesn't feel like he's trying to kill people for fun or anything like that. But very quickly over the course of the story, you focus back and forth between different perspectives. You feel like each side, when they lose something, it feels just as important. I thought what was going to happen watching this series of movies was that I was going to focus on Daryl, he'd be my favorite character, and someone like Fleming, he just screamed evil anime villain. That's what I assumed was going to happen. But to my surprise, Gundam Thunderbolt was all about showing personal stories where, whether you're on the Xeon side, whether you're on the Federation side, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, everyone is human here. And the human nature of this show really is the star of the show. That is the story. You have someone like Daryl, who is a sniper who's lost quite a few limbs already, and throughout the series he loses even more. Without going too heavy into specifics, the idea of progression in technology is a very important one. One side is very much about trying to progress the Gundam pilots to their full potential so they can completely connect with the machines to be able to be better than anyone else on the battlefield. At the cost of your own humanity, you might be the saving grace for your entire squad, but with that sacrifice also leads to the progression of, if this works for you, you know damn well they're going to do it to other pilots, and who knows what innocent bastard is going to have to cut off their limbs just so they can progress and be a better soldier for everyone. You look at Daryl, someone who is a martyr in a lot of ways, and you feel like he's the type of person who's okay giving up his life or giving up his limbs if it means saving his comrades, but you know the doubt of what his sacrifice will mean for future generations and future pilots. And it's a pretty interesting question, all things considered. As the scientist behind this entire Operation Carla is probably one of my more favorite perspectives, I would have to say, in the show, especially considering where her story goes in the second season or the second movie. It's so interesting to see someone who generally, I feel like when you have the experimentation angle really try to play up as an important role, you feel like they either A, are very into the scientific angle and they don't care what happens to human sacrifices along the way, or you get the very emotional side. And the emotional side was the one that we focused mostly on. But it's interesting to see how she was so guilt-driven that it almost completely crushes her mind throughout the run. And to see that and just really focus in, you can say that, like, how could you ever focus on any other side? How could you focus on the Federation side when you have such personal stories? You start off with so many sacrifices and you introduce a character who kills people like Daryl's best friends or just friends on the battlefield. Generally, stories like these, they just don't put too much focus on the other side, meaning when you do focus on them, you think they are the psychotic anime villain. But you never felt that in terms of Fleming's side. When you focus on his side, which you don't get as much in the first movie or the first season as you do in the second, you still get quite a bit in December Sky to really get an idea that even though they may enjoy the thrill of the kill on the battlefield, when you get back onto ground or the spaceship, you really do feel like there's a personal love story there. A love that someone like his love, who seemingly is so guilt-driven that she's driven herself to drug overdose because she just can't take the fact that they have to send in innocent kids time after time after time just so someone like Fleming can get into the main spot to take out the enemies, and there's just so many casualties at such a young age. There's a level of guilt on Fleming's side where you have the level of guilt on Daryl's side, but the guilt on Daryl's side is a lot more on the scientific angle where he's okay just giving up everything, despite when he sleeps he misses the human touch and the ability to run, which he no longer can do. What I really like about Fleming is how he feels a lot more connected to understanding that there's a ton of sacrifices happening here, and the idea of love that can't be because of the guilt that consumes you. On the battlefield, you see this eye candy, this spectacle that just blows you away and knocks your socks off. But when you get back onto the ship, you get a lot more personal stories there, and each side has a romance story that's brewing, and honestly, each is just as tragic as the last. So they're going too much into specifics. Drugs and memory loss can be a pretty big thing in this series, and honestly, it's pretty heartbreaking. And the fact that they make you care for both of them equally, it makes it very easy to not say one side should win over the other. If you were to ask me which one has the most satisfying stopping point, December Sky without a doubt, that ends in a way that there's still so much left to tell, but obviously it feels like it's conclusive in a certain sense. The battle ends, but there's still more left to see. Bandit Flower, on the other hand, it ends on a giant cliffhanger that leaves you saying, oh, they must be making a season 3, or they must be making another movie, and that has yet to happen. The reason being is that the manga kind of had to take some hiatus because of the author and artists had some health issues, so they had to go on a hiatus, and because there's always a Gundam in production, Sunrise didn't have the studio to obviously make it when more manga was out, so we are going to be waiting a decent while, most likely for that season 3 of the ONA series, which then will obviously be compiled into whatever the movie will be titled. So if you do only have time for a select number of anime, I do highly recommend you watch December Sky because it is absolutely visually and narratively amazing. But I do also recommend the other sequel series, which is Bandit Flower. Despite having a giant cliffhanger, it has me eager to honestly read the manga at this point. It's something that really gripped me, hooked me in, but also makes me want to see more Gundam series in the future. It has a very adult feel. The characters are adult. There's no real anime gimmicks or anything like that. It has a mature feeling, which is honestly a breath of fresh air in the anime medium. So while yes, it does leave you off on a brutal cliffhanger that's been 3 years in the making now, it's honestly just because of lack of source material at the time and because their production teams were busy making other Gundam properties, but the team has expressed wanting to make more Thunderbolts, so if you are fine waiting, I would personally say watch December Sky now, and whenever the Season 3 does get confirmed, definitely check out Bandit Flower is my honest-to-go opinion. Overall, I would have to say visually this is one of the best looking anime I have ever seen. The color palette in this series and just how good the hand-drawn everything looks is completely stunning. Character design wise, they all have an adult feel like I mentioned. No one feels like an anime character. There's one side character that briefly gets shown in the show where I'm like, that feels a little more typical, but overall everyone feels like adult males, adult females, like they're fighting in a galactic war that is bigger than teenagers going to high school. But the visuals, the animation, it just has your eyes glued to the screen wanting to melt from the gorgeous imagery. The laser blasts, the explosions, the debris, and the overall space battles. It feels like there's so much always happening on screen, and December Sky definitely is the best visually looking one, and that goes hand in hand because in December Sky you're fighting in a open debris field, where you're fighting in the Thunderbolt sector, where you're in space, so a lot of things is happening and exploding, and because of gravity not being a real thing, pretty much everything's floating around, so it gives you a very interesting spectacle. With Bandit Flower, there's a lot less action, and the action that is there is either grounded on a planet or it's underwater. The underwater stuff, I have to say, was really interesting, because you typically don't get to see mecha battles in terms of having like an underwater aesthetic where you get to like just see like almost lightsaber looking attacks or blasts through machine guns. It looks really cool and they have a lot of fun with the animation. But December Sky had the best action, if I'm being completely honest, and has the most entertainment factor. Some people rip into the second season of Thunderbolt, but honestly, the narrative is there, it just leaves off on such a big cliffhanger. But if you're looking for just spectacle, the visuals just have such fun, really making it feel like never at any point can you look at something and say that looks ugly. At a static level, it looks drop dead gorgeous, and moving, you just have this weightlessness in the space, or you have the crushing defeat of the ocean trying to crumble you. There's a moment in the second season where you just have this gorgeous effect of just the ship being destroyed, this Gundam being completely crushed by the pressure of the ocean, and it looks completely hopeless because that's just how realistic the combat can be, that not even the pilots are the biggest thing. It's honestly just Mother Nature depending on what's happening on screen. I feel like visually, it really just had something to prove, like it wanted to be one of the best looking Gundam series ever produced, and definitely it being an ONA series originally worked in its favor because rather than stretching it over 12 to 50 episodes, it was 4 episodes for each season of the ONA and compiled into a film where they add a few new bells and whistles. Not only can the narrative improve a little bit, it also improves visually, and honestly, I just completely was blown away. It's one of the rare cases where if you watch in the English dub, you get to soak in everything Thunderbolt has to offer. And at every moment when you rewatch any scene, you're probably going to notice something different that really does suck you in. It is just completely gorgeous, and I can't believe this exists, especially considering that even years after its initial release, I can safely say this is still one of the best looking visual anime to ever be produced. Now, in terms of the overall sound production, the visuals are definitely going to be the thing that people recommend Thunderbolt for because it visually is stunning. But I think the sound design is equally as important. The sound effects across the entire series is just so gripping. At every moment, you feel like there's a sound being placed, and while there is a lot of sound effects in any production, this feels like every creak, every punch, every piece of debris that could have a sound, it's there. Every moment you feel like there's life behind every action, and the sound effects really suck you in as if giant robots are moving across the series, or someone's walking down the hall, or there's a big piece of combat happening. And the voice actors are amazing, I have to say. Now, I watched the first 2 movies in the English dub, and I rewatched December Sky in the Japanese. Japanese is fantastic. I'm never going to say not watch the original version, because the original version is incredible. But when you have actors like Johnny Young Bosch who voiced Daryl and is doing their very much Lelouch persona in a more cool, calm, and collected way, there's just so many great actors across the board that just has me never wanting to watch anything other than the dub, and maybe that's blasphemy for some, but for me it just really does suck me in and make me say that the acting across the board is absolutely phenomenal. It makes me feel like none are anime characters, which they already don't look like anime characters. They look like adult people, so I don't feel like I'm watching a typical high school anime, which you're generally used to. It feels like adults, and the acting actually matches that. It doesn't even feel like the side cast were just given the low casting profiles. It feels like everyone has some acting skills behind their belt there, and it really does make it feel like everything is professional across the board. So when you have these great actors and you have this amazing sound effects and then you back it with an amazing score, it ties together this production to really just scream quality across the board. OST is incredible. It has this very jazzy but also classic rock feel. Mostly the jazz is the star of the show. I mean, you kick off with an amazing jazz tune, and both of the pilots have very distinct musical tastes, so whenever their songs are playing, you know who's about to be approaching and who's about to be crushing the forces without much struggle. I really enjoy the music across the board, and while sometimes you can watch these fights and say, okay, they're really making the music the star of the show, maybe it's time we hear a character talk, it's very hard to get annoyed at any possible moment watching this, because it does feel like it screams quality, it oozes quality, and it just has me so excited. Overall, just watching Gundam Thunderbolt, it really did give me everything I wanted. The only thing that really is a disappointment is that there isn't a season 3 yet, and honestly it has you really wanting to just go read the manga because it is an incomplete adaptation. But it does feel like we are going to get it eventually, even though it may take a couple more years, especially considering everything happening in the real world and Sunrise making other Gundam projects currently. But since the material seemingly is there or getting there, we should get it eventually, and that's a good sign. If you can only watch one version of Thunderbolt, I would say just watch December Sky and wait for hopefully a season 3. But honestly, I would recommend getting both. Not only is this such a good watch, it's one of the rare cases that I wanted to own an anime. I don't own a lot of anime, but when I contacted Right Stuff, I specifically requested this. Even though they gave me a giant list that I could personally choose from, this was the one I wanted to see because I knew in Blu-ray, on a giant TV, it would look amazing, and it completely sucked me in. The story was there because it was way more on the personal sides of a Zeon and Federation style war. I never felt like either side was more on the right than the other, because one side was fine using just innocent kids as mindless fodder to make their super soldier into a giant weapon, where the other was fine sacrificing their top pilot for modifications. Each side did very questionable things, but both of the main characters and their personal love stories were just as tragic and intriguing as the other. If you want to get your own copy of Gundam Thunderbolt, December Sky, or Bandit Flower, you can go to Right Stuff. That link will show them that I sent you there. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, do you want to win a $50 Right Stuff gift card? It's very simple. There will be a tweet pinned on my Twitter profile, which I'll have linked down in the comment section. Take a screenshot showing that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel on this review, and 1 week later, Right Stuff will select one random winner to have a $50 holiday special where you can use their amazing sales to get whatever anime goodies you want. So thank you so much to Right Stuff for sending me these review copies. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support. If you're new around here, hit that subscribe button to make sure you see new anime content in the future. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.